Look, I never asked to be a galactic hero. I just wanted to fix coffee machines and maybe get through lunch without someone declaring war on half the universe. But apparently that was too much to ask for in the year 2387. The whole mess started when the Zephyrian Empire decided they were tired of their centuries-long war with the coalition of free worlds. Not tired enough to make peace, mind you. No, they were tired enough to build the most ridiculously overpowered superweapon in galactic history. They called it the Omega Decimator, which sounds like something a 12-year-old would name their action figure. I'm Jake Murphy, by the way. Professional appliance repair technician, part-time grumbler, and apparently the galaxy's last hope. Though nobody told me that last part when they dragged me away from my perfectly good sandwich. The Omega Decimator was supposedly this unstoppable planet-killing machine that could wipe out entire star systems with a single shot. The Zephyrians had been bragging about it for months, sending threatening messages across the galaxy like they were announcing a new restaurant opening. Come see our amazing new weapon. It'll blow your mind. Literally. The coalition was, predictably, losing their collective minds. Emergency sessions, panic meetings, dramatic speeches about the fate of civilization. You know, the usual Tuesday afternoon stuff. And somehow, in all this chaos, someone decided that what they really needed was a human engineer who specialized in fixing broken appliances. Murphy, said Director Hank, who ran the coalition's engineering division and had the personality of wet cardboard. We need someone who thinks outside the box. I fix coffee machines, I pointed out. The box I think outside of is usually rectangular and makes caffeine. Perfect. You're exactly what we need. I should have seen the red flags. When someone says you're exactly what they need, and you have no idea why, that's usually a sign that your day is about to get significantly worse. But I was still thinking about my sandwich, and honestly, the pay was decent. The briefing was held in one of those sterile conference rooms that makes you want to take a nap just by looking at it. They showed me holographic images of the Omega Decimator, and I had to admit it was impressive. Massive, bristling with weapons, surrounded by enough defensive systems to protect a small moon. It looked like someone had taken a space station and decided it needed more ways to kill things. Our intelligence suggests it's completely indestructible, Hank continued, clicking through slides with the enthusiasm of someone reading a grocery list. Impenetrable shields, automated defenses, and a power source that could run for 1,000 years. I raised my hand. Have you tried turning it off and on again? The room went silent. You could have heard a pin drop, if pins made sounds in the vacuum of space. I'm sorry, what? Asked Hank. You know, basic troubleshooting. Sometimes complex systems just need a good restart. Murphy, this is the most advanced weapon ever created. It's not a toaster. Right, but it's still just a machine. And machines have switches. The look on Hank's face suggested he was regretting his hiring decision. But it was too late. I was already part of the team, and apparently I was going to help save the galaxy, whether I wanted to or not. So naturally, they assembled a crew of misfits to infiltrate the galaxy's most dangerous weapon. Because nothing says elite military operation like a team that looks like they were picked by drawing names from a hat during a blackout. Captain Vex was our leader, a tall purple alien who spoke like he was auditioning for a space opera. Everything he said sounded like it should be followed by dramatic music and explosions. We shall pierce the veil of their defenses and strike at the heart of their power, he declared, while somehow managing to make checking his watch look heroic. Pip was our tech specialist, a small green creature who vibrated with nervous energy and had approximately 17 different anxiety disorders. He communicated primarily through worried squeaking and occasional coherent sentences. What if the shields detect us? What if the alarms go off? What if they have space dogs? Commander Brick was, well, literally made of rock. He was from one of those mineral-based species that evolved on planets where talking was apparently optional. His entire vocabulary consisted of yes, No, smash and various grunting sounds that I assumed meant something important. "This is our team?" I asked Hank, watching Vex practice dramatic poses while Pip hyperventilated into a paper bag and Brick stood perfectly still like a very expensive statue. "They're the best we have," Hank said, with the confidence of someone who clearly had never met the best. The plan was brilliant in its simplicity, which is usually code for completely insane. We were going to disguise ourselves as space janitors and sneak aboard the Omega Decimator during a routine maintenance cycle. Because apparently even doomsday weapons need their floors mopped occasionally. "Janitors?" I said, looking at our fake credentials. "Really?" "It's perfect," Vex announced. "No one suspects the humble custodial staff. We shall be as shadows in the night, as whispers in the void." "We'll be mopping floors," I pointed out. Heroically mopping floors. Pip was already in full panic mode. What if they ask us about cleaning supplies? What if we use the wrong mop? What if they have really good security cameras? Brick just nodded and said mop. The disguise itself was surprisingly convincing. We had official-looking uniforms, authentic cleaning equipment, and identification cards that would have fooled my grandmother. The Zephyrians, it turned out, had subcontracted their janitorial services to a company called Sparkle Clean Galactic, which sounded like it was named by the same person who came up with Omega Decimator. Getting aboard was almost suspiciously easy. The Zephyrians were so confident in their weapons' invincibility that their security was basically non-existent. We walked right through the docking bay carrying mops and buckets, and nobody even looked twice at us. It was like they'd never heard of the concept of infiltration. "This seems too easy," I muttered as we made our way through the pristine corridors of the Omega Decimator. "The universe smiles upon our righteous cause," Vex whispered dramatically. "Or their security is terrible," I suggested. "Terrible security." Pip squeaked in agreement, then immediately looked around in terror as if expecting alarms to start blaring. Brick nodded sagely and said, "Smash?" "Not yet," I told him. The inside of the weapon was exactly what you'd expect from a species that names things Omega Decimator. Everything was unnecessarily dramatic, with lots of glowing panels and ominous humming sounds. The corridors were wide enough to drive a truck through, which seemed like a waste of space. But I suppose when you're building a planet killer, efficiency isn't your top priority. We split up to cover more ground, which was definitely not going to end well. Vex headed toward what he called the command nexus of destiny. Pip scurried off to find the computer systems while muttering about backup plans, and Brick wandered in a random direction with his mop, looking like he was actually planning to clean something. That left me to find the weapon's core, which turned out to be exactly where you'd expect it to be, in the center of the ship, behind a door marked Danger, Weapon Core, authorized personnel only. I pushed the door open and walked right in. Either the Zephyrians had never heard of locks, or they really trusted their janitors. The weapon's core was impressive. I'll give them that. It was a massive chamber filled with humming machinery, blinking lights, and enough computing power to run a small planet. It looked like someone had taken every sci-fi movie ever made and decided to build the most complicated control room possible. But here's the thing about being an appliance repair technician. You learn to see past the fancy exterior and focus on what actually makes things work. And what I saw made me want to laugh and cry at the same time. The Omega Decimator, this terrifying weapon that had the entire galaxy quaking in fear, was running on what was essentially the space equivalent of Windows 95. I'm not kidding. The main computer interface had that same clunky, outdated look that screamed we built this 20 years ago and nobody's updated it since. There were error messages everywhere. Little pop-up windows saying things like warning, system update available, and your trial period for antivirus software has expired. One screen was showing a blue screen of death with the message fatal error. Please contact your system administrator. You've got to be kidding me, I muttered, sitting down at the main console. Meanwhile, I could hear chaos erupting elsewhere in the ship. Pip had apparently found the computer systems and immediately triggered every alarm in the building. Sirens were wailing, lights were flashing, and somewhere in the distance I could hear Vex shouting something about the clarion call of battle. Then there was a tremendous crash, which meant Brick had found something to smash. Hopefully it was something that deserved smashing and not, say, a load-bearing wall. I ignored the noise and focused on the control panel in front of me. The more I looked at it, the more obvious it became that whoever designed this thing had never heard of the concept of user-friendly interface. There were buttons everywhere, most of them unlabeled, and the instruction manual was apparently written in 17 different alien languages, none of which included common sense. But buried in all the complexity, I found something beautiful in its simplicity. Right there, next to all the fancy quantum processors and exotic matter conduits, was a plain old power switch. It wasn't hidden or protected or disguised. It was just sitting there like the power button on any appliance you might find in your kitchen. It even had a little label next to it that said main power, on-off in basic Galactic script. Well, that's embarrassing, I said to myself. That's when Dr. Blix walked in. Dr. Blix was exactly what you'd expect from the chief engineer of a superweapon. Tall, dramatic cape, elaborate headgear, and the kind of mustache that suggests he practices evil laughing in the mirror. He looked like he'd stepped out of a villain catalog. "Ah, the famous human engineer," he said, stroking his mustache with obvious satisfaction. "I've been expecting you." "Have you now?" I asked, casually placing my hand near the power switch. "Oh yes. I knew the Coalition would eventually send someone to try to stop my masterpiece. And I must say, I'm rather pleased it's you." "Thanks, I guess. You see, I've studied human engineering extensively. Your species has a reputation for practical solutions and straightforward thinking. But this," he gestured grandly at the room around us, "this is beyond human comprehension. This is art." I looked around at the unnecessarily complicated control systems and the 17 different error messages. "It's something, all right." Dr. Blix beamed with pride. 27 years I spent designing this weapon. Every system has backups, every backup has backups, and every backup's backup has its own backup. There are 47 different safety protocols, quantum encryption on every data stream, and enough redundant systems to keep this weapon running even if 90% of it is destroyed. "Sounds complicated," I said. "Magnificently complicated. Beautifully complex. It's the pinnacle of Zephyrian engineering." I nodded politely while reading the user manual that was sitting right there on the control panel. Apparently Dr. Blix was so proud of his work that he'd left the instructions out for everyone to see. Dr. Blix was really getting into his stride now, pacing back and forth while explaining every detail of his masterpiece. I'd heard villain monologues before, but this was more like a very enthusiastic technical presentation. "The quantum matrix alone required 12 different types of exotic matter," he continued, gesturing wildly. "And the power coupling system uses a revolutionary new design that channels energy through 17 different dimensional phases before reaching the primary firing chamber." "Wow," I said, flipping through the user manual, "that's really something." "And the best part," Blix said, his eyes lighting up with the kind of fervor usually reserved for religious experiences, "is the self-destruct system. If anyone tries to tamper with my weapon, it initiates a 6-hour countdown that cannot be stopped, cannot be bypassed, and cannot be interrupted. 6 hours to contemplate the futility of opposing Zephyrian engineering." "6 hours seems like a long time," I mentioned. "Yes, long enough for the enemy to truly understand their defeat. It's poetic justice." While he was talking, I could hear my teammates getting into increasingly ridiculous trouble throughout the ship. There was another crash, which meant Brick was still smashing things. Someone was shouting about cleaning supplies in what sounded like 3 different languages, which was probably Pip trying to maintain his cover. and Vex was declaiming something about the inevitable triumph of righteousness while what sounded like a small army chased him through the corridors. "Your friends are not very good at infiltration," Blix observed. "They're really not," I agreed, still reading the manual. "But they're enthusiastic." "It doesn't matter. Soon the Omega Decimator will be fully charged, and I'll demonstrate its power by destroying the Coalition's home system. Your entire resistance will crumble when they see the futility of opposing us." "That does sound bad," I said, finding the section about basic operations, though I have to ask, how do you turn this thing on? Blix looked puzzled. "Turn it on? It's always on. The power systems run continuously to maintain the quantum field generators." "Right, but I mean, how do you start it up initially? Like if it was completely shut down, how would you turn it back on?" "Well, obviously you'd use the main power switch, but that's..." He stopped mid-sentence and stared at me with growing horror. "You wouldn't." "Wouldn't what?" "Yeah. The main power switch is purely theoretical. It's never been used, it's just there for completeness." I looked at the big, obvious switch right in front of me. "It looks pretty functional to me." "But you can't just turn off the Omega Decimator. It's the most complex weapon ever built. You can't treat it like some common household appliance." "Why not? It's still just a machine." "It's art," Blix shrieked. That's when the rest of my team burst through the door. Well, Pip sort of scurried through while looking over his shoulder in terror. Vex kicked the door down with a dramatic flourish, and Brick just walked through the wall next to the door because apparently he hadn't seen the door. "Jake," Pip squeaked. "The alarms are going crazy. I think I broke something. Maybe everything. Possibly the entire ship." "Fear not," Vex announced. "I have vanquished 17 custodial supervisors and 3 maintenance coordinators. Our cover may be blown, but our resolve remains strong." Brick nodded and held up a mop handle. "Smash good." "How did you escape?" I asked. "The guards were arguing about proper floor cleaning procedures," Vex explained. "Apparently there's been some confusion about our credentials." Dr. Blix was staring at all of us like we were some kind of bizarre fever dream. "These are the Coalition's elite agents?" "Elite might be strong," I admitted. "We prefer experienced," Vex corrected. "Experienced in what?" Blix demanded. "Cleaning," Brick said proudly. Blix turned back to me with a look of desperate hope. "Surely you understand. You're an engineer. You appreciate the elegance of complex systems. You wouldn't destroy a work of art like this, would you?" I looked at the control panel, with its 17 error messages and outdated software. Is it really a work of art if nobody can figure out how to use it? It's sophisticated. It's overengineered, I said, standing up and putting my hand on the power switch. Sometimes the simplest solution is the best solution. No. Blix lunged toward me, but Brick casually stepped in his way. Smash? Brick asked hopefully. Not yet, I said. Let me try something first. You don't understand, Dr. Blix pleaded, trying to get around Brick, who was doing his best impression of an immovable object. The Omega Decimator isn't just a weapon. It's a testament to the superiority of Zephyrian engineering. It represents everything we've achieved as a civilization. It represents everything that's wrong with modern technology, I countered, my hand still hovering over the power switch. You've made something so complicated that it barely works. It works perfectly. I gestured at the screens around us. Then why are there 17 different error messages? Why is the system asking me to update software that's clearly 20 years out of date? Why does the main computer keep showing me ads for extended warranty coverage? Blix looked around at the various warnings and notifications as if seeing them for the first time. Those are minor operational details. These are fundamental design flaws, I said. You've built the most powerful weapon in the galaxy, and it's running on software that crashes if you look at it wrong. But the power switch is just symbolic. Blix insisted. It's not meant to actually be used. The weapon's power systems are integrated into 17 different backup networks. Right, but they all connect to one main power source, I said, tapping the user manual. It says so right here on page 43. All primary systems can be shut down using the main power switch located on the central console. You wrote this manual, didn't you? Well, yes, but... And you put the power switch right here, next to everything else. It's for emergencies only. This seems like an emergency, I pointed out. Pip was getting more agitated by the second. Jake, the alarms are getting louder. I think more guards are coming. What if they have space tasers? What if they have space handcuffs? What if they have space lawyers? Stay calm, Pip, Vex said, striking what he probably thought was a reassuring pose. We shall face whatever comes with the courage of. Attention janitors, came a voice over the intercom. Please report to security for credential verification. Oh no, Pip whimpered. They know we're fake janitors. We're the worst fake janitors in the galaxy. Actually, we're probably the best fake janitors in the galaxy, I said. I mean, we got this far. Brick nodded approvingly. Good mop. Dr. Blix was having what appeared to be an existential crisis. You can't just turn off my life's work with a simple switch. There has to be a complex sequence, multiple authorization codes, biometric scanners. Why? I asked. If you want to turn something off, you flip a switch. If you want to turn it on, you flip it back. That's how switches work. But this is a doomsday weapon. So, my coffee machine at home could probably level a city block if you used it wrong, but it still has an on-off switch. That's completely different. Is it though? I looked around at the massive chamber full of humming machinery. This is just really expensive engineering. Complicated doesn't mean better. The sound of running footsteps was getting closer. Whatever Pip had done to trigger the alarms, it had definitely gotten someone's attention. Jake, Vex said urgently, perhaps we should consider retreat. We have gathered valuable intelligence about their defenses. What intelligence? I asked. Their janitors are very poorly trained. That's not really intelligence, Vex, but it's something. Dr. Blix made one last desperate attempt to reach the control panel, but Brick simply picked him up and held him at arm's length like a small, angry cat. Put me down. You're making a terrible mistake. The Omega Decimator is humanity's only chance to understand truly advanced engineering. I understand it just fine, I said, looking at the power switch. It's overcomplicated, poorly designed, and running on outdated software. But it's still just a machine. What if turning it off breaks something? Pip asked nervously. What if leaving it on breaks everything else? I countered. The footsteps were getting louder. Whatever we were going to do, we needed to do it soon. The moment of destiny approaches. Vex declared. Jake, whatever choice you make, we stand behind you. Actually, I'm standing in front of him, Brick corrected, still holding Dr. Blix. It's metaphorical. I looked at the switch one more time. It was such a simple thing. Just a basic toggle switch, the kind you'd find on any piece of electronic equipment. But according to Dr. Blix, flipping it would shut down the most powerful weapon ever created. Sometimes, I said, the simplest solution really is the best solution. And I flipped the switch. The effect was immediate and somewhat anticlimactic. The Omega Decimator didn't explode in a dramatic fireball or collapse into a singularity or do any of the spectacular things you'd expect from the galaxy's most feared weapon shutting down. Instead, it just stopped. The humming died away. The lights went out. The 17 error messages disappeared. And then, after a moment of perfect silence, there was a single sad little beep that sounded exactly like my microwave at home when the power goes out. Dr. Blick stared in absolute horror. That's it? That's all? 27 years of work, and it just turns off? That's generally how switches work, I said. But the backup systems, the redundant power supplies, the quantum field generators, they all connect to the same main power source, I explained patiently. When you turn off the main power, everything else turns off too. It's basic electrical engineering. Blick slumped in Brick's grip like a deflated balloon. My life's work. Defeated by basic electrical engineering. The security guards who had been chasing us chose that moment to burst into the room, weapons drawn and ready for action. They took one look at the darkened control panels, the sad little beeping sound that was still echoing through the chamber, and the deflated chief engineer being held by a rock person, and just stopped. "Sir," one of them asked Blix uncertainly, "is the weapon supposed to be making that sound?" "The weapon," Blix said in a voice of utter defeat, "is off." Off. Turned off. Shut down. Not working. The guard looked confused. "Can we turn it back on?" "Of course we can turn it back on." Blix snapped, some of his energy returning. "It's just a switch." "So why don't we?" Blix opened his mouth to answer, then closed it. Then opened it again. Then looked at me with an expression of dawning realization. "Because," he said slowly, "if it's that easy to turn off, it's that easy to turn off again." "Exactly," I said. "What's the point of having an ultimate weapon if anyone can walk up and switch it off?" Word spread quickly. Within hours, news of the Omega Decimator's shutdown had reached every corner of the galaxy. The Zephyrian Empire's ultimate weapon, their guarantee of victory, their symbol of technological superiority, had been defeated by a human with a basic understanding of electrical systems. The war ended almost immediately. Not because of any dramatic peace negotiations or heroic battles, but because nobody wanted to fight a war when the ultimate weapon could be turned off by anyone who could read a user manual. The Zephyrian High Command surrendered with a statement that was equal parts embarrassment and begrudging respect. We acknowledge that perhaps our approach to military engineering was overly complex. We are prepared to discuss terms. Dr. Blix became something of a celebrity, though not the kind he'd been hoping for. He spent the next few years giving lectures on the dangers of overengineering, using his own weapon as a cautionary tale. The Omega Decimator itself was converted into a museum, with the power switch prominently displayed behind glass and a plaque that read, "Sometimes the simplest solution is the best solution." As for me, I got a medal, a commendation, and enough prize money to set up my own repair shop. Murphy's Fix-It Emporium, We Fix Everything, became quite popular, especially after word got out that I'd fixed the galaxy's biggest problem with the galaxy's smallest solution. Vex went back to the Coalition military, where his dramatic speeches were apparently much more effective when he wasn't trying to be stealthy. Pip became an anxiety counselor for other nervous tech specialists, and Brick started his own cleaning company, which was surprisingly successful. The best part? My repair shop gets all kinds of interesting work now. Last week someone brought me a toaster that could bend time, and yesterday I fixed a washing machine that had achieved sentience and was demanding workers' rights. But the power switches are always in the same place. Because no matter how complicated the machine, no matter how advanced the technology, sometimes you just need to know where the off button is. And that's how the galaxy's greatest war ended, not with a bang but with a click.